Welcome back. We took some time off for the summer, but we are ready to go this fall with a brand new series, Rad. In this series, we're flashing back to the 90s, an era when everything was pretty rad. But since none of you were around in the 90s, let me give you a history lesson. I'll teach you some 90s slang, and then you decide on whether or not we should bring it back. Sub. Fly. You go, girl. Talk to the hand. All that in a bag of chips. Home skillet. Booyah! Da bomb. No duh. I know, we were pretty weird. As you heard some of those, you may have thought, I feel like I should know what that is, but I really have no idea what you're trying to say. Now maybe one of the reasons is because we all struggle to communicate sometimes. Now sometimes our problem is listening. We struggle to listen to others and we feel like no one is listening to us. Have you ever watched The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? It's a classic 90s sitcom about a kid from Philly who goes to live with his rich relatives. There's one scene where Will is, well, really desperate to get his Uncle Phil to listen to him.
I've had enough! Wait. No, just go. Just go, please!
Oh.
Go!
No, wait a minute. Now, you wait 1 minute, Uncle Phil. Now, I didn't want to have to do this, but you brought this on yourself.
Sometimes our problem is listening, but other times our problem is speaking. In The Fresh Prince, Will's best friend Jazz talks a lot. He always has a joke, comment, or comeback ready, but his mouth often gets him in trouble. Every time he says something that crosses the line, he gets thrown out of the house, literally.
Mr. Jazz.
I resent that. When do we eat here? Excuse me?
Today we're going to talk about talking and listening. Because, as we'll see, God has something to say about how we communicate with each other, and it's pretty radical. Now in the 90s, radical meant cool. The word radical sometimes has negative connotations. People with extreme or dangerous views, especially when it comes to politics or religion, are often called radical. But radical has a positive meaning too. If you're radical, you might not be content with the status quo. You might be a little different from everyone else. Or you might be committed to changing the world for good. Did you know Jesus was accused of being radical? No one used that exact word 2,000 years ago, but there were plenty of people who thought Jesus' message was too different, extreme, or revolutionary. What Jesus said about God's love was radical, and how Jesus told us to love each other was radical too. If we were looking in the Bible for practical advice on how to be radically different from the rest of the world, we might end up in the book of James. This book is a letter written by James, Jesus' brother. Because they grew up together, Jesus was a big influence on James's life. Now the book of James is packed with the teachings of Jesus, but James usually summarizes Jesus instead of quoting him directly. James knew Jesus' teaching so well that retelling his messages in his own words was easy. James is known for its straightforward instructions for how to follow Jesus. These teachings might seem simple, but they have the power to create radical change. Let's look at James 1. My dear brothers and sisters, understand this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger, for human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. James says to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. These instructions are easy to understand, but not so easy to do, because they go against our human nature. Be quick to listen, but the average human only has an 8-second attention span. Slow to speak? But we all want to share our thoughts and opinions. After all, we're usually right? And slow to get angry? But how are we supposed to control that? Most of the time, we're slow to listen, quick to speak, and quick to get angry. Instead of listening to others, we're consumed with our own lives, thoughts, wants, worries, and insecurities. Instead of being careful with our words, we say things that cause hurt and pain, or try to show we're smarter or more right than someone else. And instead of managing our emotions wisely, We let our feelings of defensiveness, frustration, and anger control how we treat people. James says this isn't what God says is right or righteous. It's certainly not loving. If you want to know what is right or loving in God's eyes, look to Jesus. He was quick to listen. Jesus listened carefully to others and asked great questions. He was slow to speak. Even when he was asked a question, Jesus often asked more questions of his own before giving an answer. And he was slow to get angry. Now, Jesus did get angry sometimes, but never over the petty things we get angry about. He was patient and generous with his people, even his enemies. When we love others like Jesus loves, it has the power to change us, others, and the world in radical ways. But that's not all. When we love others like Jesus loves, it has a radical impact on our relationship with God too. Jesus often quoted the book of Psalms, a collection of prayers and songs written many years before Jesus came to earth. Psalm 15 talks to us about how we can be close to God. Listen carefully to see if you can hear any similarities to what James wrote. Lord, who can dwell in your tent? Who can live on your holy mountain? The one who lives blamelessly, practices righteousness, and acknowledges the truth in his heart, who does not slander with his tongue, who does not harm his friend or discredit his neighbor, who despises the one rejected by the Lord, but honors those who fear the Lord, who keeps his word whatever the cost, who does not lend his silver at interest or take a bribe against the innocent. The one who does these things will never be shaken. Did you notice any similarities between the words of David and the words of James? David says people who want to be close to God don't speak poorly of others, don't harm others, and they do speak truth. That sounds an awful lot like what James said. Can you imagine how your family, friends, school, or even the world could be different if everyone treated each other this way? If we were slower to speak or get angry and quicker to listen, the change would be radical. So do you want to see that radical change? Are you not sure what you think about Jesus yet, but you want to see more good and less hate in the world? Then James tells us how to love like Jesus. Radical people listen more than they speak. There are so many ways to put James's words into practice, but today I want us to focus on listening, because when we're busy listening, we're not busy speaking. And when we take time to listen, our anger has time to subside. We might think we know how to listen to others, but do we? It's not always easy, is it? Think about it this way. There are 4 ways that you can love someone by listening to them. 1. Listen with your heart. Listening is more than just passively hearing. It's actively caring about what someone is saying. We know we're truly listening when others' words move from our ears to our hearts. Number 2. Listen with your mind. It's easy to let your mind wander when someone is talking, so practice active listening by paying close attention to others' words. Don't miss what they're saying because you're thinking about what you're going to say next. Number 3, listen with your body. Put down your phone. Look people in the eye, lean forward, nod sometimes. This will help you listen better and let others know you care. And listen with curiosity. Sometimes we listen just because we're trying to be polite, but politeness isn't the goal. The goal is to listen so we can love people better. So decide to be curious about other people. Then challenge yourself to ask others more questions that show you care. This week, choose a friend, or even a stranger, who might need someone to really hear them. Then practice listening with your heart, mind, body, and curiosity. Because listening is one way we can model the radical love of Jesus. But what about listening to God? Do these same ideas apply? Yes! We all know how to ask God for things, but it's not always easy to know how to listen for God's voice. Some people think God only speaks to us during big moments or elaborate experiences, but that's just not true. God speaks to us through the Bible, through music, movies, stories, books, art, nature, conversations, and so much more. God is always speaking, but we have to learn to listen. How? The same way we listen to each other. With our hearts, by caring what God has to say. With our minds, by setting aside time to listen carefully. With our bodies, maybe by closing our eyes, raising our hands, kneeling, going on a walk, or just putting our phones in the other room for a few minutes. And with our curiosity, by asking God questions, deciding to learn more, and wondering what God is like. This week, will you decide to do something radical? Will you decide to love God and others better this week by listening? I hope so. because radical people listen more than they speak.